August 1st, 1943. Over Ploiești, Romania. The air vibrates with engines straining at the edge of their limits. Inside a B-24 Liberator flying barely 500 feet above the ground, Captain Leon Johnson grips the controls as black smoke rises ahead like a storm wall. You can hear it before you see it, flak, ripping the sky apart with a metallic crack that echoes through the cockpit. Below, the oil refineries of Ploiești burn. For the men in the bombers, this is another mission, terrifying, chaotic, and personal. For the German High Command watching reports filter in hours later, this is something else entirely. This is the beginning of an understanding they have avoided for years. Oil is the war. In Berlin, the first damage assessments arrive while smoke is still rising over Romania. The figures are incomplete, confused, and contradictory, but the tone is unmistakable. Storage tanks destroyed. Cracking towers collapsed. Pipelines severed. Production halted or slowed to a crawl. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall of the Luftwaffe, dismisses the worst estimates with bravado. Repairs will be made. Defenses will be strengthened. The enemy will be punished. Yet deeper in the Reich's command structure, a colder realization is forming. General Georg Thomas, head of the Wehrmacht's Economic Planning Office, has been warning about this moment since before the war began. Germany does not have oil. Germany conquers it, synthesizes it, and hoards it, but never truly possesses enough. Romania's fields at Ploiești are not just a supply source. They are the beating heart of the Reich's mobility. Every Panzer thrust, every Luftwaffe sortie, every mechanized column depends on what flows out of those refineries. And now, for the first time, the Allies have shown they can reach it. Back in Romania, fires rage for days. Engineers work around the clock, dragging hoses through wreckage still warm to the touch. The Germans and Romanians rebuild with astonishing speed, but the illusion of safety is gone. The sky itself has become hostile. By early 1944, Allied planners no longer see oil as just another industrial target. They see it as a lever, one that can stop entire armies without fighting them head-on. The combined bomber offensive shifts its focus. Ball bearings matter. Aircraft factories matter. But oil matters more than anything else. On April 5, 1944, American bombers returned to Ploiești in force. This time, the attacks are higher, heavier, and relentless. Radar-guided flak erupts in perfect black patterns. German fighters claw upward, burning precious fuel just to intercept. Every defensive action consumes the very resource they are trying to protect. Inside the German High Command, the mood darkens. Field Marshal Erhard Milch reports that pilot training hours are being cut. New Luftwaffe pilots are arriving at the front with shockingly little flight time. Experienced aces are ordered to stay grounded unless absolutely necessary. Fuel is being rationed not in weeks or days, but in individual sorties. On the Eastern Front, Panzer commanders begin receiving orders that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Limit movement. Tanks are dug in like artillery. Training exercises are canceled. Engines are not run unless combat is imminent. A Panzer division that cannot maneuver is no longer a spear. It is a static liability. You can feel the war slowing down. By June 1944, just weeks before the Allied landings in Normandy, reports crossing Hitler's desk use the same phrase again and again. Brennstoffmangel, fuel shortage. Synthetic fuel plants inside Germany are now under sustained attack. Places like Luna, Merseburg, and Politz are hit repeatedly, repaired and hit again. Each repair requires time, labor, and materials Germany no longer has in abundance. Inside one such plant, an engineer watches gauges drop and knows exactly what it means. Not just fewer barrels produced, but fewer aircraft in the air. Fewer tanks reaching the front. Fewer chances to respond when the enemy chooses the moment. And when June 6th arrives and Allied forces pour ashore in Normandy, The German response is sluggish, fragmented, and hesitant, not because the commanders lack will, but because they lack fuel. Entire armored divisions wait for authorization to move, while ration calculations are argued over in rear headquarters. The German High Command does not announce this realization. It does not appear in propaganda posters or radio speeches. But by the summer of 1944, the truth is undeniable to those inside the system. Germany is no longer fighting for territory. It is fighting for oil, and it is losing. July 20th, 1944. Rastenburg, East Prussia. Inside the wolf's lair, the air is thick with smoke, dust, and disbelief. Maps are torn from walls. Officers shout over one another. Adolf Hitler, shaken but alive after the assassination attempt, stares at a situation board that now tells a different kind of story, not of betrayal but of paralysis. Pins mark Panzer divisions that exist mostly on paper. The fuel figures arrive that same evening. They are brutal. Daily aviation gasoline output has fallen by more than half. Synthetic fuel plants struck in May and June are still not fully operational. Romanian deliveries from Ploiești are irregular, reduced, and increasingly vulnerable to interdiction. Rail lines bringing what little fuel remains are under constant attack. For the first time, the German High Command understands that even if every soldier remains loyal, even if every factory worker stays at their post, the Reich cannot move the way a modern army must. On the Western Front, this reality becomes lethal. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge requests permission to counterattack the Allied beachhead in Normandy with massed armor. The response from OKW is evasive. Fuel allocations are under review. Some divisions receive enough for a single day of movement. Others receive nothing at all. Tank crews siphon fuel from wrecked vehicles. Trucks are abandoned not because they are damaged, but because they are empty. You can hear it in the reports. Engines that never start, columns that halt in open fields, commanders waiting for orders that will never come because the fuel to execute them does not exist. In the air, the situation is worse. By August 1944, Luftwaffe fighter units are shadows of their former selves. New pilots arrive with barely 120 hours of flight time, sometimes less. They are told to conserve fuel during training, to glide where possible, to avoid unnecessary maneuvers. When Allied bombers appear, German interceptors often scramble too late, climb too slowly, and break off too early. Each engagement costs fuel Germany cannot replace. At Luna, one of the Reich's largest synthetic fuel complexes, American bombers return again and again. The explosions are methodical now. Cracking towers collapse. Storage tanks erupt into fireballs visible for miles. Repairs take weeks. Attacks arrive every few days. Engineers work knowing the next strike is inevitable. One of them writes in his diary that it feels like trying to carry water in a sieve. Inside Hitler's inner circle, arguments erupt. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, warns that the fuel crisis is becoming irreversible. He pushes for concentration of air defenses around oil targets, even at the expense of cities and troop concentrations. Goering resists, furious at the implication that the Luftwaffe cannot defend everything. But the numbers do not lie. Every flak shell fired, every fighter sortie launched, consumes fuel, and defending oil with fuel accelerates the shortage. It is a trap with no exit. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army senses weakness. In Operation Bagration, Soviet forces surge forward not just with manpower, but with relentless momentum. German units that once relied on rapid counterattacks now fall back slowly, deliberately, and too late. Tanks are blown up by their own crews to prevent capture, engines still intact but useless without fuel. A German major watches his battalion retreat on foot past abandoned half-tracks and whispers something no report will ever record. We are becoming an army of the First World War again. By September 1944, Allied intelligence confirms what German commanders already know. Critically low. Some Panzer divisions are limited to a handful of operational vehicles. Training schools for pilots are effectively shut down. The Luftwaffe is no longer bleeding, it is starving. Even Germany's last gamble reflects the oil crisis. Plans for new wonder weapons, jet fighters, rockets, advanced submarines, all promise salvation through technology. But technology still needs fuel. Me-262 jets sit idle on airfields, engines cold, waiting for allocations that never arrive. V-2 rockets strike London, terrifying civilians, but consume resources that could have powered divisions in the field. The war continues. Men still fight. Cities still burn. But the German war machine has lost its rhythm. The tempo that once shocked Europe, the rapid thrusts, the sudden encirclements, the relentless pressure, is gone. In its place is hesitation, rationing, and immobility. By the autumn of 1944, the truth is clear inside German headquarters, even if it is never spoken aloud. The enemy is not just at the borders. It is in the fuel gauges, hovering near empty. December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Dawn breaks under a low, gray sky. Snow muffles the sound of engines as German armor creeps forward through narrow forest roads. For the men inside the Panzers, this moment feels like resurrection. One last chance to seize the initiative, one final gamble to change the course of the war. But beneath the optimism lies a fatal weakness. Each tank carries just enough fuel to reach the Meuse River, on paper. The Ardennes offensive, soon to be known as the Battle of the Bulge, is born not from strength but desperation. Adolf Hitler believes a concentrated blow in the West can split the Allies, capture Antwerp, and force negotiations. His generals know the truth. The operation depends entirely on capturing Allied fuel depots intact. Without them, the offensive will die where it stands. The German High Command has already accepted the unthinkable, that Germany can no longer supply its own armies. As the attack begins, initial success masks the problem. American units are surprised. Roads clog with traffic. Villages change hands in fierce, close combat. But by the third day, reports begin to change tone. Panzer columns halt not because of resistance, but because fuel trucks have not arrived. Some never existed in the first place. At Kampfgruppe Paper's spearhead, SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Paper stands beside his vehicles and watches crews drain fuel from knocked-out American trucks. His orders are explicit: capture gasoline at all costs. The men fight for fuel cans as fiercely as they fight for ground. Engines idle in the cold to avoid restarting, wasting fuel but preserving momentum. When the fuel finally runs out, vehicles are abandoned in neat lines along the road, perfectly functional and completely useless. In the air above the Ardennes, the skies are eerily quiet. The Luftwaffe cannot provide sustained support. Fuel reserves have been hoarded for a single massive effort planned for New Year's Day, Operation Bodenplatte. Until then, German pilots are grounded, listening to distant artillery and knowing they cannot intervene. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe finally strikes. Hundreds of German aircraft roar into the air at once, sweeping low over Allied airfields in Belgium and the Netherlands. For a moment, it looks like old times. Aircraft burn on the ground. Hangars explode. Anti-aircraft fire tears into attackers flying straight and low. But the cost is catastrophic. Many pilots are inexperienced. Navigation errors scatter formations. Friendly flak downs German aircraft. And when the planes return, there is no fuel to replace what has been spent, nor pilots to replace those lost. Operation Bodenplatte cripples the Luftwaffe not because it fails, but because it succeeds once and cannot be repeated. The skies fall silent again, this time permanently. Inside Germany, the fuel crisis becomes visible even to civilians. trains are cancelled. Trucks vanish from roads. Factories shut down not from bomb damage, but from lack of power and transport. Speer reports that even emergency fuel allocations can no longer be guaranteed. At the remaining synthetic fuel plants, Allied bombers appear with clockwork regularity. The workers know the routine. Sirens. Flak. Impact. Fire. Repairs begin before smoke clears. Then the bombers return. By February 1945, German fuel production is a fraction of what it was a year earlier. Some plants produce nothing at all. Others operate for days before being shut down again. The system is collapsing faster than it can be patched. On the Eastern Front, German units retreat toward the Reich itself. Tanks are positioned as stationary strongpoints, used like pillboxes. Fuel is reserved only for short movements or final counterattacks that rarely materialize. The Red Army advances with confidence, knowing German mobility is broken. A Soviet tanker later recalls seeing German panzers abandoned with full ammunition racks, but dry fuel tanks. Inside Hitler's bunker in Berlin, briefings now include fuel reports alongside enemy positions. The numbers shrink week by week. There is talk of miracle deliveries, last reserves, emergency measures. None change the reality. A mechanized war without fuel is no longer mechanized. By early spring of 1945, Germany's armies are still fighting, fiercely, desperately, but they fight like men dragging chains. The engines that once carried them across Europe are silent. The aircraft that once darkened the skies are grounded or destroyed. The Reich has lost not just territory, but motion itself. And in a war defined by movement, speed, and industrial power, that loss is fatal. March 23, 1945. Near the Rhine River, Germany. Under a moonless sky, Allied engineers work silently, assembling pontoon bridges as artillery thunders in the distance. When the crossing begins, it is fast, coordinated, and unstoppable. German units respond with courage, but without coordination. Messages arrive too late. Counterattacks are planned and then canceled. There is no fuel to execute them. Across the river, the German war machine does not collapse in a dramatic explosion. It simply cannot move. In headquarters from the Ruhr to Bavaria, commanders receive the same directives. Hold positions, conserve fuel, avoid unnecessary movement. Tanks are dispersed and hidden, not to prepare for counterblows, but to preserve what little gasoline remains. Some units receive enough fuel for a single maneuver, one chance to act, and must choose when to spend it. Most never do. Inside Berlin, Albert Speer presents the final figures to Hitler. Synthetic fuel production has fallen to single-digit percentages of pre-1944 output. Romanian oil is effectively gone. Rail transport is crippled. Even moving fuel from one depot to another is now a major operation, vulnerable to air attack at every step. Hitler listens, then dismisses the implications. He orders defenses to be held, counterattacks to be launched, miracles to be expected. But the orders are written for an army that no longer exists, at least not in the way modern war requires. In the skies above Germany, Allied aircraft roam freely. American P-51 Mustangs loiter over roads, railways, and fields, hunting anything that moves. German flak fires sporadically, conserving ammunition and fuel for generators. Fighters rarely rise to meet the enemy. When they do, it is often for the last time. The Me-262 jet, once hailed as a revolutionary weapon, becomes a symbol of the fuel crisis. Technologically superior, terrifying in combat, and mostly grounded. Jets are hidden under trees, engines preserved, pilots waiting. When sorties are flown, they are short, rushed, and strategically irrelevant. There is no fuel for sustained operations, no reserve for losses. On the ground, panzer divisions dissolve into infantry. Tanks without fuel are stripped of machine guns and optics, used as static bunkers or blown up to prevent capture. Crews fight on foot, carrying Panzerfausts instead of maintaining engines. Officers who once planned sweeping maneuvers now draw defensive lines measured in meters, not kilometers. The Red Army crosses the Oder in April. The Western Allies surge eastward from the Rhine. Germany is being crushed from both sides, not by superior tactics alone, but by unstoppable momentum. The enemy can move. Germany cannot. In Berlin, the final irony unfolds. Fuel still exists, small pockets, emergency stores, hidden reserves, but they are meaningless now. There are no coherent formations left to use them. Roads are jammed with refugees. Units are fragmented. Communications are broken. The war has moved faster than the fuel that could have powered its defense. As Soviet artillery begins to fall on the capital, the last operational vehicles inside the city are carefully rationed. Tanks are positioned at intersections and left there. Engines are run briefly, then shut down forever. Fuel is saved not for movement, but for generators, radios, and final messages. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler takes his own life. The Reich he led into a mechanized war ends it largely on foot. In the final days, German soldiers surrender in vast numbers. Many still carry weapons. Few have vehicles. Allied troops advancing through the ruins notice something strange. Intact equipment abandoned everywhere, trucks, tanks, half-tracks, all silent, all empty. After the surrender, Allied analysts walk through the wreckage of Germany's war economy. Their conclusions are blunt and unanimous. The strategic bombing of oil targets did not just weaken Germany. It immobilized it. The German High Command had built its early victories on speed, coordination, and fuel-fed momentum. Once oil was taken away, the war was decided, not in a single battle, but in thousands of moments where an engine did not start, an aircraft did not take off, and an order could not be carried out. The real battlefield was never just Normandy, Stalingrad, or the Ardennes. It was the refinery.